Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's watch and see what happens.
Recently?
No.
Okay. Who is going to be the first person that you want to call tomorrow?
I mean, my sister,
Yeah.
but
Do you want
also
to call her
scared
with or without me?
without you.
So his response, non-verbally and verbally, to Lauren's question is completely in line with everything we've seen. Just that like, oh, that is highly concerning. And the fact that he's not like, I want to call my sister, I miss her. He, I think, is saying he feels obligated. And just imagine, I mean, what the hell? That he would, by obligation, have to tell her anything. It's making me angry, actually. I don't know if he's perceiving it right, but if he is, and if I'm perceiving him right, then yeah, it's pissing me off that he has been put in a position to feel that way. I don't know if I'm reading it right. Maybe we'll find out.
I mean, my sister,
Yeah.
but
Do you
also
want to call her
scared
with or without me?
without you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do you need to prepare her?
No, but maybe a little preview.
Okay.
Before I drop any like bombs on her,
Yeah.
I want her to know like, hey, I'm alive.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Got a little sun.
I mean, so he could be completely misguided. I could be reading him wrong, but the markers of abuse are there. He has done nothing wrong. He went on, he's 32 years old, right? He went on a TV show, and I've talked about this before. It's totally rational for family members, having never seen the show, to be extremely concerned and skeptical of the notion of this show. That's okay. But that's a far cry from producing what I think we're seeing in him. He is saying that he has to build up to disclosing to her where he's at and what he's done. I think what he's saying is, I plan on, without you there, talking with her about, hey, I'm alive. And I think what he's planning on, maybe not concretely, but maybe concretely, that at first he would either avoid the question or even lie to his sister that he's not engaged. And then maybe tell an attenuated version to his sister of, well, it's a reality TV show that's been on. It's about finding your soulmate, and I've met someone, and he doesn't say that he's engaged, and I'm just seeing how things go, and it's there's a lot of question marks or whatever. So he would gear up to, and then maybe the next day he would say, yeah, so when I said, well, actually we're engaged or whatever. The fact that he now, who knows, he could be misinterpreting. I could also be misreading it. But the fact that he is so afraid that he knows that it is, one, going to be, that she is going to disapprove, one, two, that she is not going to listen to him, three, that she's not going to respect him as a 32-year-old man, four, that it is going to be terrifying for him. That's what I'm hearing. That's abuse. That's abuse. I don't know if people are noticing that. I worry that people aren't, because of, one, that he's a man, and two, the way that he presents, because it's easy to see one side of him that is negging of her and reminiscent of other men in people's lives that were negging and rejecting or withholding or insulting, critical, or whatever. And those are all things that I've talked about, but it's a problem in our society that victims do not know that they're being victimized in this way because of lack of awareness and advocacy. It's a problem that from the outside, we don't recognize victims easily. And it's a problem regardless of gender of the victim, but it's a particular problem for men. I mean, there are men that believe it's impossible to be abused, and in a sibling relationship in particular, right? And sometimes people will, comment or they'll email in, they'll say something like, I've heard of abusive spousal relationships, marriages, but is abuse between siblings possible? And it always surprises me that notion is not out there. It clearly is not enough anyway. Anyone can abuse. You can be abused by your own kids. It's not common, but I've seen it. You can have a kid, and maybe the parents were to blame for the development, but not always. There are kids that are adopted into a family, and that child, and I've seen as young as 9, will be absolutely terrifying to the parents, abusive to the parents. Most people would say, well, he's 9, he's not responsible. Well, we could really say that about anyone. You can have a 35-year-old sister who went through some shit and has a lot of reasons to avoid looking at something. And, there's varying levels of responsibility or morality that we would impose on someone. And of course, a 9-year-old, we would have a lot less of that. But my point is that if you are there firsthand, and of course, if you are being abused by your child, by your 9-year-old child, who is going to listen to you? And I just think it's absurd. Now, might someone claim abuse when it's not happening? Sure, of any age or gender or whatever. But I point out all this out because it seems so clear to me that I don't know if it's abuse, but something has gone wrong in this family, of his family. And a lot of the things that we're seeing could be a direct result of that.
Yeah.
But I'm good.
Yeah. How are we going to explain to your dad that you're engaged?
Okay, this is interesting because I, from my memory, do not remember him ever talking about his dad. He's talked about his mom, but I don't remember him talking about his dad. And it has been a question of mine because it's a part of the bigger picture, right? So let's hear what he says here.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm 32 years old. Like, he can't hold my hand like through life.
Yeah.
The whole way. So
Yeah.
I eventually got to take the wheel.
All right, that's interesting. That sounds different than what he would say about his mom and his sister. I can't tell, but what it sounds like is overprotection, nice overfunctioning. So there are different versions of overfunctioning, and I've talked about this in my deep dive on codependent personality disorder. Listen to that deep dive if you care to learn more. But I determined in my experience 3 different types of overfunctioning codependency, one of which is controlling, which maybe the sister is a candidate for, I can't know. And another is to be self-sacrificial and accommodating. So it'll be received, the overfunctioning will be received in a way that will not feel horrible, usually, consciously anyway, but will still result in the underfunctioner continuing to, that the relationship configuration continues, that the overfunctioner is all, they're always picking up the pieces for, and overly protective parents, if they're not being controlling about things, can exhibit this sort of codependency and this sort of overfunctioning. So he is talking more in that way of, he can't hold my hand. And what an interesting revelation or disclosure. I don't know, and this is, of course, just trying to look at the very limited data. Therapists do this all the time. I do it sometimes, I suppose. So I don't want to do it here. In that, it's sort of there's an analogy of that it's at night and your friend loses his keys on the way to his car. And it's on the street, and you come outside and you see him looking for his keys, and there's one street lamp and he's just doing a circle around the street lamp, and you're asking him, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I lost my keys. Oh, well, why are you only looking underneath the street lamp? Did you drop it underneath the street lamp? And he's like, I don't remember where I watched it, but this is the only place where the light is. So the analogy is, we look where the light is. We look where we have something to say, and things we don't know about, then we tend to, as humans, avoid acknowledging that we don't know a lot of things. And therefore, the answer might lie in, the keys might be in the darkness. It doesn't make it easy to find the keys, but we can't assume that the keys will be in the light. And I can't assume that a conceptualization or an understanding of him is relevant to the tiny little bits of data that we've been given in the edit. And so I just want to put that out there. But as a jumping off point, it's possible that I've seen this happen so many times. It's almost like inevitable that when you have tragedy in a family, like a death, sometimes it can be divorce and one of the parents moves far away, that the parent that is left with the children will feel so bad and maybe even ashamed, but at the very least they'll feel bad for their kids, that they will overcompensate, at least for a time, by coddling in a pathological way. And I'm not talking about you got to be tough on your kids to help them to be independent. I'm not anywhere in that category. It's possible that for him, as his mom, as Dave's mom was, because we heard I think 11 years or something of struggle. And I believe Dave was still a minor living at home when that process began, that for the father, he felt bad for Dave, naturally, was also stretched thin himself because, worrying about his wife and also maybe having to take over more of the parenting, who knows, that he would overcompensate with Dave by being overly nice and spoiling him in a way. And that can have an effect of keeping a child in an adolescent state, because whenever they try to break out of that, the accommodating, overfunctioner, codependent parent will figure out a way unconsciously to keep the underfunctioner underfunctioning. Like if the child were to say something like, hey, I was thinking about moving to another town. Maybe they just have this fantasy of maybe. And the overfunctioning parent will say, what? And that would be very concerning, because that would break that system, which would result in the codependent person having to face the possibility that they believe their only worth is taking care of other people, or their only way of retaining closeness is when they have someone that is underfunctioning and they are overfunctioning for them. Listen to my deep dive on that. But anyway, so for the overfunctioner, they might say, consciously they would think, and the thing that they would say is, well, I don't know about that decision. Why would you move to another city? I mean, everyone you know is here, and where are you thinking about moving? And the adult kid is like, well, I was thinking about moving to Austin, Texas. And then the parent's just like, oh, I mean, but have you heard about what's going on there? And, I don't know what they would say, but there would be some kind of effort there. And since up until that point, the underfunctioner has been underfunctioning and the overfunctioner has made sure of that. And the underfunctioner actually likes the overfunctioner because he doesn't like someone taking care of you, but there's cons that come with it, that the underfunctioner will not be confident in exploring that because historically they haven't been competent. That's the underfunctioner's pitfall, is they assume they're incompetent. I'm trying to think if I see that in him, maybe in relationships a bit. Maybe evidenced by him going around the room and asking everyone. That was him wondering, am I incompetent in this relationship because we haven't had sex, in this very simplistic way? I could see that. Anyway, so that's what can happen, and it can keep the adult child in a state of underfunctioning. So, and the way that he would frame it and maybe even unconsciously believe it to be when he's asked about relationships in the past, he would just say the things that he said in the pods of, well, I've always just been really superficial about looks because I work in plastic surgery procedures. And so that's why I've never had a close relationship. And that might be consciously what he thinks, but it's possible that that has nothing to do with it. That the reason why he hasn't had a close relationship is because his system has kept him in that state. Another possibility from another angle that could be happening at the same time is that he would volunteer himself as that role as a way. So there's so many things to say. I'll just say very briefly that when families go through difficulties like the loss of the mother, especially when the relationships are complicated, because if the relationships are complicated, the leading up to the death and the post-death can really be difficult for people. It's really hard to face feelings when you're thinking in your heart, I don't know if I have that much love for that person that left. Does that make me a horrible person? Can I even say that? I don't know. It gets really complicated. People get real stuck. And one of the things that can happen, even in a well-functioning family when they go through a loss like that, is individuals, in fact, maybe everyone, will regress, meaning that they will return to a safer mentality and lifestyle and way of thinking. And if you have young kids, you've seen every parent has, and every primary school teacher has seen kids do this, that you'll be with your 6-year-old and they'll be stressed out for some reason. Maybe they're in trouble or whatever. And you will hear them use words and grammar from 2 or 3 years earlier, even when kids are treated well. It's a normal way that we do this. It's less noticeable when we're adults, because if we regress 15 years, it won't likely exhibit itself through the way that we talk, but it will exhibit itself in the way that we think and the way that we behave subtly. Anyway, so it could be regression that's happening in the family, keeping him in that place, needing him to be in that place. And since the chronic anxiety in the family is not being addressed, he has been in that place, and he needed something so drastic of a break, of a cutoff from his dad and from his sister, like going on a reality TV show that doesn't even allow you to have your phone with you and you go into the pods, that was the only way he could break free. I think he is almost kind of saying that in a sense. Anyway, the other possibility is that he sacrificed himself and volunteered unconsciously, maybe consciously, but mostly unconsciously, to be either the scapegoat in the family to distract everyone from the pain of what everyone's going through with the mom, but also as like what can happen, and some of you might be able to relate to this, that there could have been a point when he was, say, 18 years old, 20 years old, and he has this internal need, an independent need of, I want my own freedom, I want my own space emotionally, I want to start exploring the world, and I don't want to have to constantly check in with my sister, and I don't want my dad to pick up the pieces. I want to do this on my own. And so, and I don't know, but so he indicates that he's going to do that. And then as he's doing that, either subtly or not so subtly, he sees everything starting to fall apart. His dad suddenly now is facing the loss of not only his wife, but also the normal loss of empty nest, or losing at least the type of relationship you had with your son in the past. And he could notice that or predict it and avoid doing that and sacrificing himself for his father and maybe for his sister or for the family or something. I don't know, just no indication directly of that, but it's possible given what we've seen. And I only say this because if you have gone through this, and this is why it's so important that when there are events like this that happen, frequently, tragically, whether it's, like I said, a death of an individual or a divorce and one of the parents, moves to another state, which is a sort of a death in a way, or the whole family moves and all the relationships are left behind, or someone develops a disability or something and there's a huge loss there, or whatever, it's important that there's some attention on the normal reverberations within the systems that'll occur. There's nothing wrong with regression. There's nothing wrong with someone sacrificing themselves. It's a problem when it becomes rigid and fixed in time. If he were to sacrifice himself and or be the scapegoat around the time of the death of the mother, that's expected. It's going to happen. It's another thing that how many years later? I think his mom died maybe 6 years ago or something. I'm not going to look at my notes. It doesn't really matter, but it was years ago. It's another problem if it's fixed in time. And it requires him going on a reality TV show as a way of breaking free of that. Now, the problem is that by doing this, depending on how things come around in the end, that he could be framed, and he would frame himself as being even more incompetent. So a scenario that could happen is things don't work out with him and Lauren, or maybe things do and it's disastrous, that 5 months from now, from this period of time, his life is, at the very least, it could be evaluated as not better. In fact, it might be worse. Okay. Maybe all the attack online could be used by the system, by Dave, his sister, and the dad as evidence that he is incompetent, and therefore he needs even more oversight. And he starts to really lock in on, yeah, that was a mistake to go on that. I tried to break free. I tried to be independent, and look what happened. Look how stupid I am. Deep down, that's, what one could say, right? And given how, I say childish not in an insulting way, but as a way of indicating that he doesn't have seemingly practice in this realm, even though he's 32, it could be really hard for him to have arguments that would help him to see it otherwise, right? Because he doesn't have a track record. He's like, well, I was doing fine for a number of years in this area. It's possible that this is the first time he's doing anything on his own. And if it goes disastrous, the system could, recoalesce and even lock down things even further. That can happen. So I say all this not for him, I guess, but because I don't know if I'm seeing this right, but for you, that if you've gone through that, and it could be 15 years in the past and no time like the present then to begin the work. This is why family therapy and couples therapy and relationship therapy, or at least relationship-oriented individual therapy, can be so beneficial in moments like this. When you go through an event like this, sometimes people know, maybe we should go to therapy. And people go to therapy and it'll be like grief work. And there's I'm publishing my book on grief. I believe I'm going to write a fair amount about even the phrase grief work, which has problems. But anyway, there's, good grief therapy that happens, but it's not long-term enough to address stuff like this. And that's why it's, just as it's important when you are having conflict in your marriage to pay attention to things and maybe seek therapy. It's the same when it comes to deaths and family. In fact, it's probably more important, but how many people, after going through the loss of a family member like this, know to be careful and to seek therapy out as a family, as 3 adults, right, that aren't experiencing any overt conflict that is noticeable. How many families in the United States or around the world know that, we should not only be in therapy, but maybe long-term therapy, because there's a lot of things going on here. So I'm glad that the show presented these data so that I could, because I can't remember ever talking about this before, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about, as you might be able to tell.
I'm old enough and smart enough to make my own decisions, and he just wants me to be happy.
Yeah.
Which I am. So hopefully he'll see that. I think he will.
Yeah, so he clarified more in that direction. It sounds even more like the way that I was wondering it might be.
We're just going to tell him.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear the difference in not only his plan regarding his dad over his sister, but also his demeanor. He isn't exhibiting the fear that he has when he's thinking about how he's going to tell his sister. He is having a more typical response when cast members contemplate this question. I'm just like, oh, well, he's just going to have to learn that I am my own man now, and I'm going to make my own choices, for better, for worse, and we're just going to tell him. Meaning that Dave doesn't predict that Dad's going to be jumping with joy and might have a little bit of skepticism, but he's not afraid, which is notable. If he was afraid across the board, then maybe it's something about Dave. It could also be that the dad is also a problem in that way, but I think it's important to contrast that, because at least from Dave's perspective, it shows that the sister is particular in the way that she reacts to him and has been in a relationship with him.
And for your kids with different accounts and stuff like that?
For accounts, do we want to have like both have a separate account and then have one together? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would be like most comfortable with just like having separate accounts, even like a prenup.
How would you want it to look? Because I never really thought of.
All right, that looked a little shenanigans-y, the edit. She mentions prenup, and then he has this face and he sighs. He's like, oh. And it didn't look synced up to me anyway. But at any rate, they're talking about finances, which is great. And she brings up a prenup, which on one hand, I'll just say my reaction as a viewer of the show, that is encouraging for them as a couple, because if she was a no, she wouldn't necessarily think about such matters and might not bring it up because she doesn't want to, get into stuff that is unnecessary if she knows that she's not going to get married. So that's one reaction. And the other is that, prenups have a lot of meaning and connotation with them that people can have if they want as individuals, and they're allowed to have those, whatever those are. But as viewers, we can't know what it involves, because for some people, because it's happened on other reality TV shows, maybe even this one, where people have talked about it, and I've seen a lot of discourse around it. So some people will say that it is absolutely a good idea, and every marriage should do that. Other people will say that it's a slap in the face, or it's a money grab or something, or a way of protecting unnecessarily or unfairly your assets so that you can skip town or whatever. There's a lot of different things. And the thing is we just don't know. It's at its core just an agreement between two people that they can make or decide not to, as long as there's no coercion happening or pressure. So she's bringing that up. And, maybe there's some history there for her, either for herself or witnessing people getting screwed over by divorce or other kinds of mixing of finances. I don't think she's hearing anything from him that would concern her. She's older than him, and I think maybe a little bit more established in her career comparatively to him. I can't know that for sure, but the way that they have been talking, and not only here but also in the pods about their careers, I wouldn't be surprised if she concludes that she has a lot more earning power and assets, and he doesn't. Now, he's younger, so it takes longer, but also just, I think, the focus of his career. But also, it sounds like he has the potential of huge earnings based on the business that he's involved in, but it's uncertain is the thing. Whereas for her, she has built a career in medicine that has a lot more predictability and certainty about income and whatnot. I can't know that, but that's the way it sounds. And so for her, she might think, well, and I guess that would be the smart thing. And by this point, they've already talked with people, and maybe other people have suggested it and put some fear into them that might be a good idea. That for her, she's like, well, we are headed towards possibly getting married. And although I'm confident enough to definitely head down that road, I think anyone would agree, and particularly everyone that I've been talking to, that I can't be certain if we're going to last, because time will tell, right? And other relationships, you've had that time already before you get married. So to protect my assets, which I've worked hard for, and I don't suspect that he would want to screw me over if we did get a divorce, but you never know. So, let's just have an agreement pre-marriage that if we ended up getting divorced, that whatever assets I have at this point are considered mine at that point of divorce, and that we're not going to follow the typical formula of 50-50 or whatever they do in Minnesota. So would that be, the more I say it out loud, the more I think it is advisable. It's not necessary per se, but given my vague understanding of their finances and of the viability, like a number of the yeses at the altar, two people that presumably were totally ready to get married and got married. A number of three couples have divorced from this show, including the UK season, and they had divorces, I think, within a year. So it would be rational for someone in her shoes to, just wonder and to protect oneself. And if they stay married for the rest of their lives, then it wouldn't matter, right?
Pockets of like, oh, he built this basketball empire and let me take money from whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I never thought about that, so.
Yeah. I did it, I feel like 10 years ago, I would have been like, I'll never sign a prenup. It doesn't make any sense. Like, people have talked to me about it before. And I've been very anti, but
Yeah. I don't know if I said this, but another reaction is that people will say it's very unromantic because it is allowing for a possibility that isn't happily ever after, right? And yeah, I could imagine people could viably say that. Not everything has to be practical all the time. You can say that, yeah, it's more practical that there's a prenup, but I want to at least preserve the magic and the rose-colored glasses. I understand intellectually that it could end that way, but the two of us are so in love, and I believe in us so greatly that I just don't want to have that kind of legal conversation and having that sign on the dotted line. It just doesn't feel right to me. Now, that can be ill-advised depending on the situation, but yeah, so she's saying in the past she was like that, but now she's not like that anymore, and each to their own.
I feel like it just makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I will absolutely commend how they're talking about it. That's always the key. How do you bring this up? How do you listen? How do you respond? How do you talk about it? And that's the key. There's nothing wrong with wanting or not wanting a prenup, but there is something of a problem when you can't talk about it in a way that is constructive, and they are doing that seemingly. He's not saying much, but if I just use Occam's razor, he's cool with it, which shows, because you can imagine other people in his shoes getting insulted or getting worried about abandonment. Insulted meaning that he could interpret this of like, oh, sure, so you have all this money and you think I'm going to take money. I wouldn't take, and we've seen that now that I say it out loud. We've seen that conversation on other reality TV shows where the person in his position, the person who has fewer assets, will say, how dare you accuse me of trying to get your money? I am marrying you because I love you, and that's totally insulting. And we've seen that before, and there's nothing like that at all. All right, well, I want to remind everyone to give each other the benefit of the doubt in the comments section and create a safe space for people to talk about things that even might be conflictual or might be of differing opinion. We can all have different opinions. It's okay. And there can be opinions that can be problematic, and we can still give each other the benefit of the doubt and communicate the possibility that one's opinion is problematic in a loving, caring way. A lot of you do that without me prompting you, so I guess this is just a reaffirmation of that. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.